The PRovoke podcast, brought to you by PRovoke Media and produced by the international broadcast specialist Marketeers.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the PRovoke Media podcast. I'm joined in person in London today by two leaders of, I'm going to call you the comeback kings of tech PR, I think, off the top of my head. Hotwire, one of the oldest and most respected names in the tech industry, been a bit quiet for a couple of years, a lot of changes, but we now have a brand new leadership team globally and in the UK. I'm joined by Grant Toups, who's over from the States, specially to see us, and Charlotte Harvey, who's the UK MD of Hotwire, both pretty new to the job. So we're going to be having a good chat for the Agency Leaders podcast today about what is going on at Hotwire and where the future lies. So I'm going to let you guys give me a little bit of background and introduce yourself properly. Grant, do you want to go first?
I would love to. Thank you so much for having me. It has been an easy journey to get here, so I am so thrilled to be here in person. I'm Grant Toups. I am, as you said, Hotwire's global CEO. I've been in the role since January, so I'm, roundabout as brand spanking new as you could be. Just passed through my 120th day, I think. I joined Hotwire from Burson, where I was the global chief digital and intelligence officer, and before that, the first global chief technology officer at Hill & Knowlton. So I sort of really grew up through technology as a practice, as a capability, as that evolved through social, digital, influencer, and data intelligence. So I kind of bring that perhaps not quite sectoral focus, more craft focus, which I think is nicely balanced by my friend here.
Hi. So I'm Charlotte Harvey, UK MD for Hotwire. And my journey is slightly different. So I spent most of my career in-house, was director of comms at a big engineering consultancy where I was for 15 years, started at Edelman before kind of jumping back oddly into agency life about 5 years ago, and have been talking to Hotwire for the last couple of years and was compelled to join last summer, and I've loved every minute since.
That's a good start, isn't it? Grant, you're literally, as you said, 120 days in. Does it feel for you as global CEO and you kind of looking at what you inherited, as it were, like a reset moment or more of a refocus? What's your strategy been?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question. I'm going to zoom out first. I think if we take a step back, right, a lot of agencies went through a pretty significant disruption through COVID, right? And not just agencies, right, but client buyers. And that disruption really, I think, forced most organizations to look internally. It was really this very rapid demand that everyone looked inside. And I think Hotwire was not immune to that, right? And then coming out of that experience in the pandemic, as we started to get back to some semblance of normalcy, we then saw this AI explosion happen, which was fundamentally transformative for the industry. And so for me, in part, I have been looking at the industry as it's been evolving and seeing a few things that drew me to Hotwire and that I think have mapped our course. So the first is this idea that I think the agility required of an agency is just is becoming more and more extreme. And, coming from some of the big guys doing some really incredible work globally, the ability to turn on a dime, to take full organizations and dramatically change was something that I really look at a midsize like we are and begin to believe we're kind of well on our way into the golden age of the midsize. So that is one of the things I think we see happening. I think the second is what's going on out in the world is such that AI is in some respects making every company a technology company. And that means every company needs a technology agency to help them tell their innovation, their AI story. And so for me, I look at it less as a reset or even a refocus for Hotwire and more as an acknowledgement, a realization that in some respects, we are already where our clients are going. And so that represents sort of an opportunity to get out, not just on the front foot, but in some respects, several steps ahead of where we're all going. And once we really started to talk that through as a leadership team, the path starts to become kind of fundamentally, quite immediately clear. It's more about what's next and where we're going, and less about what perhaps needs to change from the past. I think we all went through that period of disruption and transformation. And, as I look around at the business, I think I'm really focused on what those next steps look like. And there's an extraordinary amount of energy, enthusiasm inside our organization with our clients. So perhaps I guess you could call that a refocus, but I'm going to call it a bit more about living where we're going instead of where we've been.
I love that. Shai, you've obviously known about Hotwire for years. First of all, what was the attraction for you? And how do you explain Hotwire today to maybe somebody who's not so familiar with it or remembers it back in the kind of previous eras of its incarnation?
So I think the attraction to me was it does have this brilliant legacy brand. So when I was interviewing and talking to the global CEO and I was, getting a bit of a sense check from people in the industry, everybody has so much positive things to say about Hotwire. There's such a strong affection for this brand from a legacy point of view. But I think, I was really ready to take on a market role and to have the opportunity to set the culture, to set the growth strategy within a market and to kind of assume that full responsibility. But I wanted to do it in a place where I would be allowed to kind of be an entrepreneur and, I'm a real opportunity spotter. I'm a challenger and I just want to get stuff done. And Hotwire just encompassed that as a culture. There's not lots of red tape. It's not 10 things to get anything signed off. I can prove that I can hit my numbers, demonstrate commercial viability and, work within the global framework and we can just get on with it, which for me is, and I've got a great entrepreneurial team around me, is just fantastic.
It really is that agility come to life.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And you've both had, Edelman and WPP backgrounds. This must feel quite liberating for you two.
There is nothing quite like having an opportunity to be the CEO of a business. I think the capacity to have a vision, to be surrounded by people who are extraordinary in so many ways, but who I think above all else maybe embody this kind of combination of entrepreneurialism and intellectual curiosity in a way that means, we can all get really excited about where we're going. And so, it's remarkably freeing. It also happens to be, I think, a special time for us. We just are sort of in some respects, the right place at the right time, in the right moment with the right tools at our disposal.
Absolutely. And I think we've got that tech heritage and so many people in the industry are kind of maybe moving away from that as a specialism. And we really do understand technology. We've done it for 25 years. But as Grant said, we were ahead of the curve on getting in with some of that technology. We've got some brilliant innovators in our business. So we kind of saw what was happening. And so when I'm describing it, I talk about us as being a tech consultancy across PR and marketing, helping people hit their commercial objectives.
Okay, I love that. And what's the dynamic like between you two? How do you work together? How do you balance each other out?
We G each other up. I mean, we could solve anything if you put us in a room together for long enough, I think.
I think we share a lot of commonality, I think, in the way we tackle problems. Mm-hmm. I think, I am definitely incredibly inspired by the energy she brings to every interaction. I think, Char, you are among the most kind of curious people that I know. I love how quickly she moves. She is a no nonsense, we've got things to do, we're going to get them done. I think we have a very, natural, easy way of communicating with each other. And so it worked really well. And the truth is, we've really built I think a pretty high functioning executive committee across the company globally, really rather quickly. Yeah. We brought the team together as a new leadership team globally in person relatively soon after I joined, a couple months in. And from there on out, it's been actually a very easy way to communicate. We do tend to see things fairly similarly, and I think that probably makes it easier.
Yeah.
Although, I don't know, you tell me.
No, I think that's true. And I think probably both of us know our strengths and our weaknesses. And we've got people around us, deputies, other people around us who are the opposite. Like, I feel there's real strength in the diversity of the thinking in our team. And I think you and I come from a similar place, but there is a balance in the other people who come at it in a different way.
Fantastic. I love it. It's so lovely doing a podcast in person because I can see how you're
You can see our energy.
Listeners, it's all true. They do actually seem to get along. Tell me a little bit about, Grant, let's just go back to your first 120 days. What was the first thing you thought, we need to fix this?
I think the first thing was the whole industry had a go for a while, right? There were big highs after COVID, and I think we had seen a lot of compression in a lot of spaces. That certainly was true in the tech sector in general, right? As we think about the primary core client base that we had. And so, there were a few things, but for me, the biggest thing was about belief. It was about charting a course for the future. It was about articulating sort of who we wanted to be. And that meant, first and foremost, doing the work to understand the business. I think it's probably the most common trap any new leader falls in, is believing you've figured it out before you've done the work to learn what's really going on. And so I did start there, and I spent quite a lot of time getting to know the business, relatively speaking, I guess. And then I would say I really began on a bit of an inspiration tour. I was really focused on trying to help the organization see the future that I could see for it. To get to lift the head up out of the day-to-day, to look, out across the horizon, and begin to embrace what was possible. Because, we've had a couple of conversations, Maja and Charlotte and I certainly talk about this a lot. I think the sky's the limit for us. I think we are a combination of things that increasingly every communications and marketing buyer, almost independent of sector, needs. And so when you look at what's possible, that was really the first thing. It was about, how do I articulate this in a way that inspires, that motivates, that makes people feel great about getting out of bed in the morning to come to work at Hotwire or at ROI DNA, our marketing agency. And that was the first thing. It was really about attempting to embody the thing that I felt about what was possible for people. And I think, look, it's early, right? But we've rolled out kind of our strategy as part of a new leadership team. We've really started to reimagine how we go to market. We're thinking differently about clients, and we're starting to see the proof points come through of that, right? New opportunities from clients outside of the core tech sector. Of course, that's still a big focus for us, but we start to see a lot of clients and new opportunities come in there. We're starting to see a lot of bigger tier one opportunities come our way. We're doing a lot of work around partnerships. You will have seen our new partnership with Morning Consult. We're really leaning into sort of the act as though we believe what I believe is possible is possible. And I think it's manifesting. I mean, the organization seems to be really responding to it.
Okay, that's good to hear. Char, how does that translate to culture in the organization? Because it felt, I want to be totally frank with you, when in 2020, how was that 6 years ago? Started the pandemic.
Wild,
Absolutely
right?
wild. Hotwire was our tech agency of the year for EMEA.
Right.
Mainly on the back of Zoom.
Yeah. That's
huge
right. They were a
new
pandemic client.
Client. I mean, what a pandemic client. And since then, I think this is the first year you've appeared on our best agencies in the UK list.
We're very proud of that.
For 5 years. Yeah. So I've got a two-part question, really. First of all, what did you see needed fixing with the UK market, which has felt like it's the leadership has been a bit on and off for the past few years? And secondly, how's what Grant said translating to kind of building a new culture for Hotwire?
So I think I came into a team which it definitely didn't need fixing, but it needed direction and momentum and swagger. the core of this business, I was and I continue to be blown away by the people that I get to work with, both within the UK and globally. We've got some fantastic talent. So kind of coming into the UK, I came into an open position. So, it really was just about kind of picking the team up, putting my arms around them, which is what I think I do best. I love the people side of my job. It's probably the bit that kind of drives me the most. So, being able to have that kind of focus on culture, which I did, like the first 6 months of my job were just about kind of getting to know my people, understanding the clients, the commercials, the people, all of those sorts of things. And then Grant coming in January, literally within the first month, getting us together as an exco out in San Francisco and us sitting down and just basically putting a plan together, which was all in our heads. We were all doing it in our markets, but we just brought it together as a collective. And I think the core bit of that was kind of esteem and swagger, because actually the way that Hotwire shows up to its clients, the way it shows up as an employer is fantastic. And you're right, we just needed to kind of get out there and tell that story more, which is what we're doing.
Yeah, no, you're doing a very good job. I'm really interested to come back to that. Every company is now a tech company piece, because I hear this from several other agencies as well. It's obviously affecting everything that a previous pure tech specialist would do. What do you think that means for comms in practice, that you're not just working with, maybe pure hardware, software, institutional companies? It's enterprise, isn't it? That's the word I'm looking for, not institutional. I'm not a tech PR person.
I mean, that's institutional is a whole other thing, but I think I think it means a few things. So at the highest level, right, I think there's no denying the fact that there are several things going on, basically no matter where you work. So the first is essentially every organization is under pressure to find efficiency through AI. Yeah. We can talk at length about whether that's really possible and how you make that real, but the pressure is there. And so first and foremost, there is an extraordinarily complex internal comms challenge that exists, wherein it doesn't matter what you do as a company, you have to tell a very complicated transformation story that's all about technology to an employee base that has, in some respects, some skepticism about whether they should embrace it, right? Because we know, right, the if you build it, they will come movie taught us everything we need to know about this. That's not how this works. If we don't tell a simple, easily understood, inspirational and motivational story to employees about what AI means, then we will never appreciate any of the benefits of it, right? So I think first and foremost, there isn't an organization in the world that is not experiencing that challenge.
Okay.
Second, AI represents so much more than just an efficiency play. Whether you are talking about healthcare companies and their ability to tackle and sort of cure disease, whether you are talking about the ability to look at big, humongous data sets and think about things like what are the implications of climate change and how do we combat climate change, whether you're thinking about things like the ability to use technology to, say, as a cosmetics company, do color matching for cosmetics for people who might have been underrepresented before. Like there's so much headroom from an opportunity perspective. But all of that requires these companies go and tell a very different, very complicated innovation story, and to compete with all of these big technology companies, the Googles and the Metas and the Microsofts of the world, who have been doing this for decades. And so all of a sudden, it's like you're taking a bunch of people who have been accustomed to playing one sport and telling them that their success requires they play a different one.
Okay.
And so I think for us, part of what we're seeing and part of the sort of unique value proposition that we bring is not just that we understand technology. It is that we understand how to tell those sorts of stories in a way that breaks through, sort of no matter what the topic is about. And so increasingly, that I think is where we're seeing the opportunity come from. It's where we're seeing our business evolve. And it's really, really exciting because in some respects, if you are a technology communicator, right, part of what this means is that all of a sudden now you have a chance to solve problems, to tell stories, to be engaged in work that is fundamentally different than you ever have been able to before. But your core skill sets are what make you suitable for that work. And that is an unusual combination. I mean, I struggle to think of other times in history where that's been true. Yeah. Maybe healthcare communicators about the pandemic is kind of the last time, right? Because suddenly every organization had to talk about health and safety and talk about these sorts of things. That, I think, is such a profound transformation that changes, in some respects, like everything about the way we communicate, because we suddenly have this whole new type of narrative that we need to tell. And then I think the second piece of it, which we don't talk as much about because this is where we run the risk of me getting extra super nerdy, but what we don't talk as much about is increasingly people are going to these AI tools, to these answer engines for information. And what does that mean if you're now not having search play the same role it used to play, and you're talking about zero-click search or zero-click commerce? We now find that a lot of the core fundamentals of communication, earned media relations, events, right? Some of organic social, these things that have for such a long time been core to what we do, but have been in some respects arguably becoming less and less important as paid has become more important, suddenly are the ticket to being visible in these spaces. And so that combination of things, I do think is a special moment that's kind of presented at the feet, in some respects, I guess, of every tech agency. But I'm not so sure that our competitors are quite yet at the place we are in understanding what that looks like and articulating it to clients the way that we are. But, you'll tell me whether I'm right or not, I suspect.
We'll have that little chat afterwards, I think, Grant. Char, so this sounds like your client base is changing dramatically. Presumably there's some consumer non-tech brands in there. I mean, Grant mentioned kind of the beauty industry. What's that like for you? I mean, I'm guessing there's kind of a different sort of creativity play here as well in telling those stories for non-tech brands.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's incredibly exciting and interesting that the types of clients that would engage with Hotwires may be different to the ones that would have done 5 years ago. Yeah. And the sorts of briefs that we're getting in from big infrastructure players, from big B2C players, etc., to help them tell that story, because we do understand how to tell complicated innovation and technology stories, means actually for me as a leader, I can keep my people interested and engaged, because we just get to do such a wide variety of work. But yeah, absolutely the creativity piece, but also the strategy. We've got some brilliant strategists within our organisation, both within the UK and globally. And to Grant's point, the earned piece, probably 3 of the hires I've made since I joined have got basically a journalist or an earned media background. Like, I truly believe kind of earned his back in the context of geo and LLMs, that it's more important than ever.
Yeah, and it's more provable than ever. Than the earned really does contribute to, whether, buying consideration, purchase, all of that stuff. So yeah, there's I don't want to go too far down the AI and geo rabbit hole, because every single conversation we're having is about those two things.
Well, and we get dangerously close to a conversation about data analysis and data science too. But I think that's the other thing AI lets us do is all of a sudden we can now, in a much more efficient and compelling way, analyze these big swaths of data to get to provable outcomes, right? To be able to articulate the real impact. We can debate whether we're yet to ROI, but surely we are at a place where we're talking about like real statistical correlations about outcomes. And I think that is so exciting, because it lets us begin to focus much more on the outcomes we deliver for clients, as opposed to the outputs that might have been sort of the way of the past.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you both an example of a non-tech company that's actually whether one of your clients or otherwise, is handling that narrative and internal transformation really, really well when it comes to AI. Who's doing a good job of that, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are probably a number of them. I will hesitate to name a brand.
Okay.
But what I will do is I'll point you at a sector. I think I'm really, really excited. I mentioned beauty. I think there's some very cool stuff going on in beauty. I'm really excited about retail. I think there's some very interesting stuff going on in retail. I actually think we're starting to see the beginning in financial service. And I don't mean fintech. I mean like proper financial service around what is possible when you start to think about, everyday investing. And that to me we are at the beginning. It's so nascent. We're at the very beginning of what is possible. But there are definitely examples. And I suspect as we look at, recent and upcoming winners of your awards program, we're going to start to see that through line. We're coming up on Cannes. I think we're going to see a lot of case studies of that at Cannes as well.
That's going to be really interesting. I might come back to you both post-Cannes and your kind of analysis of where the tech stories are coming through really clearly and not tech brands. That would be interesting. Part 2 coming up then, obviously, guys. Part 2 coming up. Yeah. What do you think? I mean, we've talked a lot about what AI can do, what GEO is all about generally in the industry, and we've touched on it today. What do you think? I mean, it's like a kind of a good cop, bad cop here. What is AI definitely doing better and delivering in comms today? And secondly, which bit of it is still a bit overhyped?
I'm going to start with two things. I think the first is there's a pretty big fundamental question that every organization has to answer about what they think AI can do for them.
Yeah.
So for us, we are really focused on AI as an augmentation of our people. So we are looking at task sets that AI can do effectively that are either low value or high dislike for our clients, for our people, right? So the idea is how do we provide technology that allows our people to become in some respects like augmented or superhuman in that regard, right? And that looks like a few different things. There are some of those, right? And we can talk about the individual stuff, but by and large, anything that is programmably repeatable, AI can do pretty well, at least as well as a human. Precision, right? You're not as error prone, right? I think the other big area that is immediately true is AI is going to be able to analyze large swaths of data in ways humans can't.
Yeah.
So very, very rapidly, the ability to go from sort of signal to insight to action is getting compressed more and more and more. And so that process, I think, at the beginning of the work that we do and at the end, as we think about how you gather data and measure performance, that's big areas that we are looking at. I think a lot of agencies are also focused on the use of it to create content. And there's certainly some value in that. We are more focused on how we balance the human in the loop with the sort of technology automation. So in general, I like to talk about it like this. And I was actually in Athens at a conference last week, and one of our colleagues who runs innovation for us talked about this very specifically on a panel. But we try to tell people to do the first 20% of the work that you do yourself, whether that's with a pen and paper or, if you're going to draft something and you want to come up with a strategy, it's your brain, your thought, no AI. Then that middle 60% or so, you can use AI to help you, whether it is, analyzing data or writing, big swaths of copy. And then the last 20% is human in the loop as well. So that 60%, if you think about your day-to-day work, right, it's probably not the initial writing because you want your voice in that. You have a point of view. You're trying to say something, right? But there's a big middle there that you can actually get quite efficient at. And by doing that, spend a lot more time in that first 20 and that last 20, which is where you're going to make the biggest human involvement or the biggest human impact. I think the other piece, and Char and I have talked quite a lot about this, is human beings are communal creatures. We need other people to be happy. We need other people to thrive. And so we are seeing a lot of that time that's being freed up being reallocated to human interactions, to events, to like in-person stuff, which in some respects comes back to what we were just talking about. These kind of the old school PR tactics are becoming much more important again, right? But I would say one of the things that's most exciting to me for us, and this comes back to culture, and I actually think our culture in the UK business that Char has really been building is leaning into this in a pretty heavy way, is what happens when you give people the guardrails to be prudent and thoughtful, but the space to use their own creativity to think about how to solve the problems that they face every day with their clients. And what happens when you make space for those flowers to bloom? What happens when you water them and when you can turn them into something that becomes an enterprise solution, an enterprise grade solution? And that's really how, we, not to go back to Geo, but, Hotwire was one of the first in the market with a Geo offer because we saw early on that there was tech to be built there and built it. And that's just one example of what happens when I think you take this intersection of craft and creativity and say, if you could build something that would solve your problem, what would it be? And then marry that to a technologist who can build it. That's where the magic really happens. And I think, I've talked a bit about this, where does communications going? Like if I were talking to a CCO and I was telling them, this is how you should think about your team, I think we really need to have two things. Everyone needs to have either a skill as a technologist, someone who can build, or as an Imagineer, someone who can look past the processes as they currently exist and imagine a new and different way to do the things that we do. And if you can get both of those archetypes on your team in some mass, then you're going to be way out ahead of where we're going.
Yeah. Art plus science. Love it. Charlotte, what about for you? Where do you see that fitting into the work that your team is doing in London and how you're building a kind of a different kind of agency with workflow spread out differently?
I think where we're seeing the biggest success, and this is both in the UK and globally, actually when we build that thinking, that geo technology just into our briefs, when we're responding to clients, it's not an add-on, it's not a bolt-on, it's just how we operate and think, and then marry that with our kind of earned capability. That's basically our biggest success on new business and growing organically with our existing clients. So it's more about just kind of how we're doing things now and just changing the mindset of, our teams in terms of kind of thinking about the outcome in general rather than just specifically by channel or things like that. I think that's where we're seeing it show up the most.
And are your teams loving it?
Yeah, I mean, like many agencies, we've got a great kind of cohort, a lot of people who are younger generations who are much more native maybe to AI and using these technologies than perhaps people of my generation are. So I am not seeing that kind of fear factor come into it at all. People are actually kind of keen to, help them do their job in a better, quicker, easier way so they can spend time, as Grant said, on, like I'm pressing them to go out and meet journalists, go out and meet clients, go out and meet prospects. Like in person is massive for us in the London office.
Being human. And
being human, yeah.
That kind of contact, I do feel, I know that there's a whole other conversation about the kind of shrinking and changing media environment and trust in the media and all the rest of it. And, I'm kind of at the sharp end of that as well. I do think there's been too long a time where meeting up was seen as somehow indulgent or a waste of time. And I'm not just talking about long boozy lunches. I'm just just human contact. And it's a bit like, well, we can do this by email, or we can do this on a quick Zoom call or whatever in latter years. But actually, it's much slower and harder to build relationships when you're not in a room with someone, isn't it? So, I imagine for the younger generations who've maybe had the first 5 years of their career not really been able to do that because of COVID, having that time freed up to be a human being in the PR industry with human beings who are journalists must feel amazing.
Absolutely. I think it's a real premium, and it's something that is at the core of how I operate. I am a people person. I get my energy from kind of coming into the office, being around the team. And one of the things I love doing is mentoring people, supporting them, getting our senior team to be able to have those interactions with our newer, more junior members of staff is so valuable for both, for the senior team to kind of understand what the juniors are facing, but for the juniors to learn from them directly.
Okay.
I think the other thing I would say, and I'm going to put her on the spot a little bit. I think Charlotte has done an extraordinary amount of programming, bringing in outside experts, so journalists and other professionals in the field to come in and do these dinner experiences and sort of lunch and learns where our teams are being sort of trained and exposed in real time to some of the, I think, most innovative reporters doing work out there, industry folks. And that it isn't just the culture you're building inside of the organization in London, but it's also the sort of externally focused building bridges, bringing in that knowledge. I just think it's something so special because our people, there's just an energy in the operation here, which is it's not inward looking at all. It's looking outside. And I think that is fundamentally about the way that you built the culture and the programming of bringing in really thoughtful people from the outside to help our own teams grow.
Yeah, I could chat to you both for ages, but we should probably close up at some point. So our lovely engineer Shaw can go home. Charles, what's your ambition for the UK within Hotwire? You strike me as a pretty ambitious girl.
You could say that. Had my one-to-one this morning. So look, if I look down the next 2 years, clearly I want to grow this agency. I really like what Grant said, the golden age of the midsize. I actually love the kind of size and scale that Hotwire is globally, and I think we can stretch in the UK. But actually, it's about staying relevant for me to our clients. The whole agency landscape is changing dramatically, as we know. What people want from their agency, how they're buying their agency, how they want to price their agency, the tools, etc., is changing so much. And I think for me, for the Hotwire globally, being on the global exco, but in the UK, it's kind of staying one step ahead, always keeping that in-house mindset of like, how are they selling this into their CEO? How are they competing against the other functions for budget, and making sure that we are driving value, helping them with their commercial goals, and ultimately staying super relevant in a really competitive in the London market. I mean, I can't think of a more competitive agency landscape than London, to be honest. And there's some brilliant players out there.
There's some amazing agencies in London, and it is pretty crowded. But you also have to have fun while you're doing.
Oh, we have a lot of
this, fun. Right? I mean, I
lot of fun.
I honestly think there's not. What's the point in being in the creative industries if you're not having a great time with your team and your clients?
Yeah.
Frankly,
I completely agree. There's a lot of laughter that you feel. There's a lot of energy, as you say, when you come into the London office.
I felt it when I came in. Actually,
yeah.
It's a vibe.
There's a vibe.
It's a vibe.
People say that when they come in, whether it's for interview, whether it's come in as a client. There's a real energy and a vibe within the London office, and a real hunger and entrepreneurialism, which is really exciting.
It's so good to see. With the global stage at your feet, Grant, what's your ambition for Hotwire globally?
Yeah, I think, look, I'm here to build what's next. I think we have all the ingredients to be extraordinary. And I mean an agency of choice for any company anywhere in the world trying to tell a breakthrough innovation story. And that might sound like a big ambition, but the truth is I don't think we're that far away from it. I think we have the right people. I think we have the right offer. I think we have the right orientation around what it means to deliver the kind of outcomes our clients care about, to deliver excellence in a real, measurable way. I came here to win. Yeah. And I think our people respond to that. I think our clients respond to that. And I think when we have this conversation in a year or 2 years, we're going to be having a very exciting conversation about where we've come.
Okay, I love that. It's very bold. I'm kind of, I'm inspired, Grant.
I think you said to me once when we talked, Hotwire is back.
Hotwire is very much back, and I love the boldness of your ambition. You are not messing around, are you? We're going to finish off with a very quick fire round, like literally a couple of words. I'll start with you, Grant, so we can go backwards and forwards. One word to describe Hotwire today versus 2 or 3 years ago.
Challenger.
Okay. Char?
Energized, back. I can have lots of one words. Exciting.
Okay, those are both good. Grant, most overused phrase in tech PR right now?
Innovation, because people say everything is innovation. Real innovation stands out.
Yeah. Most of it's evolution, isn't it, right?
At best.
What about for you, Char?
I think similar. Innovation, transformation, over-talking, kind of a lot of the stuff that people are talking about in AI with no substantiation. I just think there's just a lot of hyperbole.
Where's the proof?
Yeah. There's a lot of BS still, isn't there? A brand who you admire for their comms, any brand anywhere in the world, not a client.
Can I jump in? I think some of the stuff that's going on in fintech right now with Revolut, Monzo, Starling, I think some of the comms that they're doing and how they're reshaping and ripping up the rule book on what is quite a traditional sector, I think is absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. I mean, my kids opened their late teens and they opened their first bank accounts and they're like, yeah, we want to go with Monzo. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah. So easy.
Yeah, because it's so easy. They make it so easy.
Yeah. Well, and how fundamentally transformative is that? I mean, go look at financial services, right? You got your bank account because it was where your parents had a bank account.
Yeah. Yes,
and now they have their own point of view.
Yeah.
Talk about innovation.
Yeah, absolutely. So what about for you, Grant? What's a brand you really admire in terms of their comms?
Yeah, I think I'm going to give Anthropic a lot of credit. I think what Anthropic has done around the way they've told their story about what their tool is for and what it isn't for. I think some of the guardrails that they're putting up, I think Dario Modi has done a really compelling job of sort of standing for what they stand for.
Yeah.
And they really, really have impressed me.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a tricky one to navigate in the current environment, isn't it? And finally, Char, what would your team say you're most obsessed with right now? It can't be Harry Styles.
Well, I'm going to see him in concert next week. So
it was such a guess.
In Amsterdam. So they might be saying I'm obsessed with my travel itinerary. I mean, I've had a dogged obsession with the culture of our business because I think if we get that right, which we're doing, it's going to lead to fantastic outcomes for our people and for our clients. Culture and people, and then also which leads into outcomes for our clients.
Yeah. That's very grown up and
very grown up,
on message answer. Grant, what about you? What are you obsessed with at the moment?
Excellence. It is. What's the point of doing something halfway?
Here to win, right?
We're here to win, and I think our clients respond to that. I think our people respond to that. I've said before, I hold myself to an extraordinarily high bar, and so too do I hold the people around me to the same bar. I would never ask someone to do something I wouldn't ask of myself. And I think our people know our clients. I think our people are really responding to that push. Okay. How do we attract and retain the very best at the craft? How do we bring them into our business? How do we keep those people that we have who are extraordinary at what they do? The agency of excellence is something that's really, really important to me. Okay, fantastic. Yeah. Thank you both so much. Hotwire is back, everybody. You heard it from Grant and Char first. Thank you both so much for your time. Absolute pleasure having a chat with you today. Such a joy. Thanks a lot.
You've been listening to the PRovoke podcast, brought to you by PRovoke Media and produced by the international broadcast specialist Marketeers.